for the recording next. This is the Contour community call for March 17th, 2020. Call's being recorded as always, so please follow our code of conduct. Now, I would like to get started with what we've been working on lately. I am just, I got a little bit delayed this morning, so I'm just in the process of typing up some things for us, some of the things that I can remember. Dave, would you be able to talk through what you've been working on the last little while, please?
Let me just turn that off. That's probably a bad joke. There we go. So, what I've been working on this month is the long-awaited Ingress status update, which is on the Ingress field. There is a status and load balancer, which is used by external DNS, so that when your Ingress object is claimed, and this is only the Kubernetes Ingress, we're not doing this for other types supported by Contour, is claimed by an Ingress controller. It writes back to the actual status field via a process, which can mostly be approximated as magic, the IP address or host name that it's externally accessible. This powers things like kubedns and other things that just assume that this data is useful. And this has been something that people wanted for a long time. So I've made it my project to get this done for 1.3. That's it.
Excellent, thanks very much. So yeah, I think the most important part about that for everybody is that that will mean that the ingresses managed by Contour will be able to be useful for external DNS, amongst other things that need that status field. We're also going to take some cues from this work has also done some foundational work to set up finally getting a HTTP proxy status running in as well. So next up, the other major thing that people have been working on is there's been a lot of work going on around TLS handling. Tero Sani from Finland is obviously not here today because it's a very inconvenient time for him, but he has done some great work on bringing a whole bunch more TLS config into Contour, and he is in the process of adding, he's looking at adding certificate auth to the front door of Contour, so that it will be possible to ask Contour to ensure that that clients must supply a certificate in order to be able to get to a particular virtual host. There is an outstanding the way that we have done Contour up till now also does have a security issue in the event that we turn this feature on, and that's that once you have authenticated to once you finish the TLS session for any virtual host, you can, if your HTTP host header says a different virtual host, then you will get the content for that host. That's just about the way that we configure the things. Dave?
You said a word there which is probably a little bit scary for people, so I want to give some very clear guidance about what is going on and why this is not an issue at the moment. Very, very clear.
Hey all, our community meeting is now, and not I thought our community meeting is at 6:30 Eastern.
That's the other week, Michael.
No, that's what the website says.
Okay, I think the calendar invite that we had is now. So
yeah, you had the old calendar invite. It says every second Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern.
Okay, well, so there's
anyway,
people here.
Yeah, but this is the other Tuesday, not that one.
Yeah, the other Tuesday's in the morning though.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, so obviously, so I'm going to put on here that we are working on the calendaring issues, and what I want to do is have that there will be a canonical single place where you get your calendaring from, and at that point I will send an announcement to the Contour announce list, and we'll announce it on all things, telling you to please delete all of your existing community meeting invites and get the ones from the central source. I am sorry about this.
No worries.
Okay, so and sorry, there is another thing that there is another step that I missed in my eagerness to get on and talk about what we were actually doing, and that's intros for, in case for everybody who hasn't been here before. My name is Nick Young. I am the tech lead on Contour, and I will hand over to Dave.
Yes. Sorry. So just to come back to what Nick was speaking about earlier. TLS, as in when you connect to a HTTPS website, does not provide you two things. It does not provide you authentication, and it does not provide you authorization. Authentication is who am I? That is not provided by TLS. Authorization is what am I allowed to do, which requires you to know who you are to start with. That is also not provided by TLS. So in the current scenario, a set of a web server which presents for a bunch of TLS enabled virtual hosts, the SNI negotiation, which is what I like to negotiate with, and the host header that you send once you've initiated that connection are independent. And in fact, the SNI certificate is also, if you request a certificate you don't want or is not signed correctly, it is on the client to decide whether it likes that or not. This in no way affects the security of or it affects the privacy of the data being transmitted over that connection, of course, unless, of course, the certificate you negotiate against has been compromised by Mossad or something like that. So if you want to get the details, this is known as domain fronting, which is basically, I'll give you a really good example. You go to any website hosted by Cloudflare that uses TLS. They will offer a bunch of different SNI certificates they will negotiate against. You can offer any one of those, get a valid certificate, set up your layer 7 connection, and then send a host request for anything else. This is no different from HTTP, non-encrypted HTTP. If you consider, you get to Contour on port 80, you send it a host request. If we have a route for that, we send it back to you. So the difficulty comes when we want to add authentication and authorization on top of the scheme. Someone if they have the yes. So I'm just pausing because I want to limit my comments here because it could be very long. The short answer is that we have to do some work behind the scenes to change the way the Contour assigns virtual hosts to TLS hosts in a way so that when someone is using certificate authentication on the client, they are actually only those virtual hosts that are authenticated through that certificate are accessible behind there. And yes, that's the easiest way to say it. Although I suspect I've just made things more confusing. This is a very nuanced topic because most of the ways that we interact with this as users, it just seems to work. And it's actually a potpourri of different standards that all work together via convention. So how's that for confusing?
Yeah. Thanks, Dave. Could we maybe, I think Levin Michael, is that clear at all? Is there anything that anything more you need to know about that? Peter as well.
I'm fine. Thanks.
I'm fine. Oh, good.
Okay, no problems. Cool. Okay. Well, so yeah, so that work is ongoing. You may have seen some discussion in the channel, about the order in which we're going to land things. And so, yeah, the whole point here is that we want to make sure that at no point do we deliver even a master cut image, a Docker image that has a problem like this, where people might get bitten without knowing it. So yes, and so we will organize all this stuff, but the key takeaway here is that client certificate authentication is coming, and yeah, hopefully it will be delivered soon. Now, currently on GitHub, the 1.3 release date is this Friday. I will be pushing that back until next Friday to try and capture these changes and Dave's Ingress status updates, and possibly as well, I have been working on some back-end changes as well that will make doing some further work with the service APIs a little easier as well. Mostly back-end stuff there. Now, so I think, so again, I'm very sorry about the confusion with the timing. As you can tell, this calendaring thing needs working out. Time zones are mix calendars are hard. When you mix meetings, time zones and calendars, it gets really hard. So yes, I apologize for that, and I will sort it out as soon as we can. And does anyone else have anything that they would like to talk about? Nope. Okay. So the last thing that I wanted to just mention was as a core maintainer team at the moment, we are using ZenHub for prioritizing issues, and I will put a link to ZenHub in the show notes, and so please have a look at that, and you'll be able to get a bit better idea of how far out we are currently planning for things to be. Perhaps the last thing, Michael, could we get a little update on where the donation process is at?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're basically creating all the collateral. Steve is actually, who is sick right now, is finishing up the matrix of competition, and that I think is one of the last ones left. I will send you guys the governance and the maintainers for Contour tonight, so you can actually review it. I'm actually going to PR it directly into the community repo, and then you guys can basically iterate on that. Like having that discussion in PR is probably going to be a little bit weird. Dave, you guys will see the both the governance and the maintainers is going to be very similar to what we've done with other projects like Harbor. Essentially, the way it will work is we're going to open it up so that contributing companies that want to come in and both influence Contour as well as influence our ability to move forward. Every company will get one vote in voting decisions from a governance standpoint. And I'm not going to put an upper limit on the number of maintainers, but usually most projects kind of manage that themselves. Just give you basically, it's almost going to be a direct copy of what we're doing with Harbor, since we kind of battle tested that before. No governance model is perfect. It's all about the community and how people interact with each other and how they work with each other. And I think that's really the most important thing. Once we actually get all the rest of the documents out and the competition, then SIG Networking is going to basically initiate the reviews. The TOC today did not really meet properly. They had a discussion around artifacts and repositories, so there was no discussion around what next steps are for some of the projects that are waiting in the pipeline. I think they're going to postpone that to the first meeting of April.
Yes, so I see. Hi, Micaiah. Sorry about the confusion about the calendaring today again. Yes, the meeting started at the wrong time because some of us had the wrong time and had calendars. So we actually are pretty much getting to the end of our agenda. Again, I'll just make one final call for other business. I think yes, most of the stuff is still in progress. The service APIs work is ongoing. And yeah, as I said, the other stuff that we mentioned already is ongoing.
There's probably a couple of issues that we can discuss. just to, because other folks might join us later. So it'd be
Yep,
worthwhile to keep the call on so I can bring a couple of things to the table.
Yep.
And Michael Payne, you're traveling, man. You were in India last week, I think. Now you're in Australia. I mean, are you doing a global tour?
Yeah, I know. I just made it into Australia. It's pretty crazy, but everything's gone into complete lockdown here. So I'm probably not even going to be able to see my father, who I came to see, which is quite ridiculous.
Okay, wow. All right, so the first thing I want to discuss is, I'm going to put it here on Slack, is there was an issue on the Contour GitHub that one of the community members brought. It's issue 2323. And that's around, what do we do as a project in terms of support features and functionality around regular Ingress? And when we get requests like this, what do we want our both modus operandi will be, and as well as our response? And kind of at a high level, I wanted to say that it depends, because every situation is going to be different, and we're going to evaluate every request on its merits. In this case, the request is around supporting sticky sessions by regular Ingress. Do you guys want to take a minute to read through the tickets so everybody brings it into their cache?
Well, while people are talking, it's important to remember that Contour, under the hood, doesn't use any of the Ingress objects that we talk about. Like, these are just notation mechanisms. The first thing we do in Contour immediately is we desugar it into our own data structure. So supporting a feature in a particular CRD or Kubernetes resource is a question of notation only. The reason why many features are not available in the Ingress object is because we'd have to do it in annotation.
Sorry to interrupt you. You're coming in a little bit robotic, and I don't know if it's just for me or everybody else as well.
Yeah, Australian internet can suck sometimes. So yeah,
I think
so
just
you were cutting a little bit.
Emote a little bit harder, Dave.
Okay.
So yeah, I think Dave's point is fair though. The reason that we don't have like all the annotations is that we try not to add functionality onto Contour until people ask for it.
Well, the reason that these things are not available in the classic Kubernetes Ingress is that they are only possible via annotations, which are disgusting.
Yes.
You can read at the bottom there. I've outlined 2 ways we can implement this feature. Neither of them are perfect. So that is why in the past we've not really prioritized engineering effort towards it, because, well, there are better ways to do things.
So
Yeah,
I
so
guess
I think,
I'm going to have 2 cents on this one. I'm not I don't know if I'm fully on board with this approach, because I feel like when you add things piecemeal like in this way to Ingress, you're always in this uncanny valley state, right? You're always in this state where some things are supported through some APIs and some things are not. And I think that makes the whole API surface area unpredictable, and that feels like an uncomfortable place to be.
It's also useful function to encourage people to not use old shitty Ingress V2 B1, which is terrible. It has all the problems, which is why we created Ingress route and HTTP proxy.
Right, which would be
it's a deliberate forcing function.
Right, and that would be a reason to just say no. We're not going to add arbitrary bespoke, arbitrary project contour specific functionality to Ingress.
so I think in this case, the reason why I'm leaning towards doing it is that I agree. I understand what you're saying, and I do agree that it's not ideal to have Ingress have sort of a subset of the features available and other things. But the fact is, the Ingress document, as Dave says, is just not capable of expressing some things. And even the annotations that we're required to do are very like unwieldy and not great. And so in this case, though, like there are people who have a genuine need for this functionality, and they cannot use HTTP proxy for other reasons, and so that means the only way that we can help them is to do that. I personally don't feel comfortable about saying to people, we could do that, but we're not going to because we want you to use HTTP proxy. I mean, perhaps we can spend some more time with people who are asking for annotations on Ingress to say, why can't you use HTTP proxy? But I think I don't think that we should be, although in general I'm in favor of being like pretty pure about like what we implement and what we don't. Like we already have a bunch of annotations on the Ingress object. I think. And this one, the only reason I said the only reason I felt that this one was okay was because it's not a large amount of work to it's, as Dave said, it's about desugaring the annotation only is the work.
One other thing to
sorry, go ahead.
One other thing to consider is what happens in the future. Ingress v1 will be replaced by Ingress v2. Are we committing to maintain this annotation soup forever?
I mean,
that's true.
I don't know if we're going to
commit
to maintain this annotation soup, but we're committing to supporting Ingress v2, right? So whatever Ingress v2 supports.
So let's be clear. Ingress v2 is actually a very bad name. It is not going to be Ingress v2. It will never deprecate the Ingress v1 object. The Ingress v1 object is going to be GA. It will be GA for the foreseeable future. The Ingress like GA object will be available and will be useful for the foreseeable future. The service APIs objects, which is one of the reasons why we changed the name, they are intended to be an adjunct to a supplement for use cases that aren't well fitted to the existing Ingress object.
So I have no problem with supporting arbitrary features through the Ingress API. My concern is that those features. My concern is when those features are chosen on an ad hoc basis, right? If we do everything through all APIs, and that's consistent and predictable, and that's fine. But when some things are and some things aren't, I feel like I want to have some underlying rationale for selecting those and being able to predict which features are going to be available.
So I think I understand what you're saying, but I mean, there are things that are just incapable of being put onto some of the APIs, and so between that and the fact that developer bandwidth is limited, we haven't focused on backporting all the features to Ingress, because right now we have been waiting for people to say, I need this feature before we would consider it, in the interests of ensuring that we don't spend developer time working on something that people don't need. That is my feeling on the rationale, is that we don't spend developer time on things that people aren't going to need. I think, sorry, I'm not sure if you're Pinchas, is it? I'm sorry.
It's Pincus. Yeah.
Pincus, sorry.
Yeah, I am unmuted just to give some perspective,
sure.
From the user, just as a user. One of the issues we have is if we open things up and we start supporting, we started out with Ingress route. We have not enabled HTTP proxy for this underlying reason, right? We have a bunch of users who are writing these objects, and we cannot carry, now we will forever, for perpetuity, need to support multiple types, HTTP proxy on top of Ingress route, because they're going to be sitting all over the place. If you follow me.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. So one of the reasons we're aware we didn't make the decision to deprecate Ingress route lightly, but we found that as we started to try and add features to Ingress route to do things like being able to make routing decisions based on non-path functionality, we just found that there were significant issues with the design, and so that was why we built HTTP proxy, was to change the model from delegation to inclusion. And so because we needed to do that, the way that we decided to help with that sort of situation is that Ingress route is deprecated, it will be removed from the product at some point in the future. And the idea there is to give you a forcing function for your users to say at some point, this is going to go away. The second prong of that attack is to ensure that there is a way for your users to migrate from Ingress route to HTTP proxy. And to that end, we've provided a tool, IR to proxy, that you can run over an Ingress route that will convert it to the equivalent HTTP proxy for you or your users.
Hey, it's Michael here.
Yep.
As another end user, I'm very close to deploying internally a web version of IR2 to proxy. So I've managed to, it's very ugly, but it sort of works. So it's just something we'll run on our cluster that will allow our developers to cut and paste their stuff into just a web page and get the output in the web page. And then secondly, just our plan because we've got a bunch of Ingress route. We're roughly half Ingress route, half HTTP proxy at the moment. It's an issue for us as well, but we just plan on getting aggressive and turning off Ingress route, and we're actually going to block it through OPA. So we'll send out email notification to our X thousands of developers saying we're going to turn this off on this date. Here's the tool to convert, and then we'll enforce OPA and block the creation of new Ingress and delete all the old Ingress. So we're taking a pretty heavy-handed approach, but otherwise you just carry too much debt through.
So the last prong that you've alluded to there is that we intended that one of the reasons that we changed the name rather than changing a version was to make it easier to do RBAC, to be able to enforce people not being able to create new ones. So you can take people's role that allows them to create Ingress route objects away and only give them HTTP proxy. That will mean that they have to migrate. As Michael says, it's a pretty heavy-handed approach, but we wanted to leave it up to you as the users as to how you did it. So and so the idea there, HTTP proxy supports a superset of Ingress route functionality. So all of the functionality that was present in Ingress route, I believe, is now present in HTTP proxy. So you should any syntactically correct Ingress route you can write should be able to be converted to a HTTP proxy. Now there are, because of the changes in the way that we did inclusion and delegation, there are some situations where the automated tool just can't guess what you mean. In which case the tool will actually tell you that it can't guess what you mean and indicate to you the bits that you need to change. And so that was sort of our plan for Ingress route. I know that, and we certainly don't want to do that again. And so we won't be deprecating HTTP proxy for the foreseeable future. Any further additions, HTTP proxy is now V1, it's GA, and we will be, that has a support guarantee that we will not perform any destructive operations to it. If there are additions to it, they'll be additive only, so that your existing HTTP proxy objects will keep working. And and we won't be taking that away anytime soon. As we add the service APIs objects, they'll, as Dave said, they will be added as as additional options for configuring things, and so they will will have options for doing slightly different use cases and having it come in a slightly different way. So yeah, I guess thank you for asking that question, because it's something that I've kind of wanted to address for a while, but haven't had the credit for. Michael, if there's any way that you can contribute back the website thing that you've got there, then I'd certainly be interested to see it. If you can't, totally understand, that's fine. But yeah, and because if you would like something like that, then feel free, please log issues in the IR to proxy repo. It's github.com/projectcontour/IR2proxy. I'll put it in the show notes as well. Yep. And so please log issues in there.
I might be able to share it, but it's also pretty horrific Go code hack and very ugly. So
yeah, so that's okay.
Maybe I'll get it.
If you want me to polish it up, or sure. If you want to just give it to us and we'll clean it up and make it available there as a separate mode, then if that makes it easier for people, then I don't see that. Especially if you've done most of the work, at least to get it started. Sure. But yeah, so because please also feel free to engage with us if you need any assistance with IoT proxy or any other things around that. The last thing that I should mention in relation to this sort of versioning discussion is that the thing that I have been working on the back end change is actually to make it so that, sorry, I'll look up the GitHub issue in a minute. It's to make it so that that Contour will talk to the API server at startup and detect what CRDs are available in the cluster. So if you don't want people to be able to write Ingress routes, once you have removed all the Ingress routes from your cluster, you will be able to just delete that CRD, and then Contour will detect that it's not there and won't look for it anymore and won't watch for it. Right now, if you try and do that, Contour will spam your logs with a lot of error messages saying that I can't find any types of Ingress route. But this functionality will make it so that that's a lot more dynamic.
Okay, so hang on, just let me play that back. So
Yep.
when we do this deprecation and we tell people we're turning it off, we should make sure that we remove the old CRD.
Yeah, once this feature is delivered, which hopefully will be in 1.3, then yes, then it will mean that currently as well there's a experimental flag to enable you to look at the service APIs. Once I've delivered this feature, I'll be able to remove that, because if you don't have the service APIs in your cluster, then Contour won't look at them. And so if you want to experiment with them, then you put the service APIs in your cluster. If you don't, then don't. And so it's the same with Ingress route. Well, the idea is that there is a hard way to ensure that there can be no Ingress routes in your cluster by simply not installing the CRD or removing it. James, you unmuted.
Okay. And then just one thing I was going to say, the reason why we're using OPA to do this is because we've got this highly sort of granular isolation around namespaces. And so doing cluster-wide stuff with RBAC is possible for us, but it's actually a fair bit of work when we can consider all of our different environments and those sort of namespaces.
Sure. Sure, understood. James.
I got nothing.
Okay, sorry. I thought you were unmuting to say something. So, okay. Welcome to our new person, Aaron, I believe. Nice background, by the way.
Yep. Thank you.
Arun's on our team.
Cool. Thank you.
All right, so we'll, I guess, kind of to button this issue up. It looks like there's lots of arguments to be made both for and against it, but given the fact that there's a real need here from at least some of our users to be able to utilize some of the Ingress capabilities like these sticky supports, and combined by the fact that this is a relatively low amount of work, I think we'll prioritize it and deliver it sometime. I'm going to say near future because I can't really provide real dates, but we'll add it to our backlog and see if we can work on it and get it out there. In terms of next steps, I think that for this discussion, I'm wondering, I want to basically put another ticket, and since now we have a significant number of community members here, and this is something that we've discussed last week, some of the folks that were on the call, I'm going to put this ticket and give everybody a couple of minutes to review it. This ticket 2325. This is a ticket that Nick kind of surfaced around. There's lots of requests around exposing specific capabilities of Envoy. Whether that's auth capabilities, access log service, and rate limiting, which I believe is something that one of our guys is looking at right now. I want you guys to go through this and read it, and we'd love to hear some of your thoughts and feedback on this. Let's give everybody a couple of minutes to silently read.
Okay. I just made some updates to the notes, just with some of the links to these things for posterity.
Oh, you want to post the notes link as well in the chat, because I think people that join late don't get to see the old chat link.
Yep, sure. That is the notes link. So you shouldn't have the edit on the end. So yes, as the person who logged this issue, yeah, I just wanted to explain a little bit about it. So the idea here is we have a few requests currently. There's 3 of them in the ticket for what amount to please expose this functionality of Envoy that lets Envoy talk to a third service. Right now there's no way for Contour to do anything other than take whatever you give us and pass it to Envoy. And the concerns that I have are around what happens when an application developer configures something like this and then it is not working. So their service could be broken and they will have no way to know anything about whether or not it's something to do with Contour that has broken their service. So that's one of the reasons that I push back pretty hard on a lot of these requests, is that I really feel as Contour is the thing that is taking the configuration and pushing it to Envoy, Contour should have some way that it can surface information about if that config is working or not. So the things that I've suggested there are that, firstly, if we add the functionality to Contour to allow it to health check Envoy clusters, that's what Envoy calls a backend pool in old school load balancer terms. If we have a way for Contour to be able to check the status of a given Envoy cluster by talking to Envoy somehow, exact details TBD, then we can, because everything in Envoy is a cluster, including when you configure things like external auth, logging, or rate limiting, each one of those will generate a cluster inside Envoy's configuration. And so then we can use if we can health check any cluster, then we can use the health check of that to be able to get the information that we then can surface to the people who are actually asking for things with these features enabled. So my end idea is that the end state I want here is that HTTP proxy will have status conditions that will tell you that, for example, you have the HTTP proxy you have configured has rate limiting enabled, and the rate limit service is working as far as the envoys are concerned. That's the sort of the MVP for this functionality. Obviously, once we have it, I would guess that we can extend it in other ways. But I think that at least the minimal amount of information we should be able to give for all of these things, which covers both the main ones I'm thinking about are the external auth use case and the rate limiting use case, that if you are creating a HTTP proxy that uses one of those services, you should be able to determine by looking only at that HTTP proxy if the service is up and running and doing what you would expect.
And kind of looking at this from a macro level, this is a super important change for us to make, because it enables us to build for the future as more and more things are coming into Envoy. I think, in conjunction with some of the other tickets that we talked about in the past around the status object, I think this is a super important thing for us to deliver in the near future. But we'd love to hear everyone's feedback and comments on that, like seeing how this may impact you.
Well, Michael here from JP Morgan again. So one of the things we've been looking at, because it's related to a couple of issues we have in the Contour repo. One of them, which is the fallback certs for the clients that don't support SNI. So in our case, it's the upstream F5 big IP DNS box. We've got all sorts of issues with that because it doesn't talk SNI, but we're also thinking about it like a delegated health checking capability. And so Envoy has like a partially implemented health discovery service that's sort of there, but not sort of well documented. It sounds like it may be similar to this, but the idea is that rather than have that, pretty crappy F5 box doing struggling under the load of all the health checking is to try and delegate it somehow down to Contour. And we're thinking a similar thing with Cloud Foundry, to be honest. But so yeah, it sounds like I'm interested in that capability as well.
So what I think Nick is talking about here is currently there are four participants in this equation: the end user with a browser, the application developer, the cluster administrator, and the development team on this call. Those are the current parties. So if something breaks, one of those parties is at fault. When we introduce a rate limiting service or an external authentication service or anything which is now another component which is outside the bounds of that, the question becomes, well, what broke and how do I know and who knows and who can be who do we escalate to? So for example, if you're an application developer and all of a sudden your page just starts going off because your service isn't working, in the current equation, who are you going to talk to? You're going to talk to your cluster administrator. There's nobody else you can talk to. The cluster administrator is going to either try and figure it out themselves, or they're going to escalate to us. There needs to be a way that if the reason that your application is not available is because some Active Directory server fell over or some external rate limiting service has decided you're out of tickets, we need a way to communicate that back to the application developer so they can solve their own problem.
Thanks, Dave. That is exactly what I was saying.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So I mean, the technicalities of how we implement this, how this is implemented, and how the figuring out of what went wrong is crucial. But the key is we need a mechanism to give that back to the application developer so they can solve their own problems.
Exactly. So I guess, can I ask any other end users on the call what they think?
I agree with the fact, sorry, this is Peter here. I agree with the fact that we should have one spot, you know, if we're creating something and it fails under the hood, that should be one point to understand the status of anything that's dependent underneath.
So to speak to that directly, like we already tell you in a very crude way, your HTTP proxy object is valid or invalid. But when there are now external services involved, your object can be valid, but your traffic doesn't work. Why is that? Well, because the global rate limiter the administrator configured, which you were not even aware of, has just decided, sorry, you don't get a request today. How do we communicate that back to the end user so they understand sorry, I shouldn't say the end user, those are the people with browsers, the application developer, the person that owns the application. How do we communicate that back? There are really kind of two options. There is status on the object, or there is the Kubernetes events. But the key question that has to be answered in adding any of this class of feature is, how can a failure or like a software hard failure in that feature be communicated directly back to the application developers who are impacted?
Dave, you cut out there on your second way of doing it. The first was status of the object. What was the other that you mentioned?
Kubernetes events.
Okay.
Yeah, the Kubernetes events, I think, are a suboptimal solution because a lot of people don't know they're there. Those who do don't look at them that often, and they have a very short lifetime.
But again, this is an implementation detail. The key blocker on any of these features is the question of how can I tell the application developer when this thing is broken?
Yes, exactly. You know, with the rate limiting one, I know the initial implementation of the rate limiter was that lift rate limiter, which is written in Go and leverages Redis and sort of runs outside of the proxy. I know Steve Sloper has been now contributing to that because I think they moved that underneath the Envoy proxy organization on GitHub. But you know, having deployed that just in test, there's a whole bunch of interesting sort of things to consider about where that rate limiter lives in conjunction to the Envoy. Like I put them across the cluster in just that network traffic at high rates, the gRPC would start failing. So I end up going back towards a sort of 2 pod sharing Unix domain socket, and like that it works fantastically. But Otherwise, it's pretty tough. And then, so there's tons of issues there, Dave. I agree in terms of how does that work and is it stable? And then lastly, they've added local rate limiting to Envoy based on, I think, like a ticket counting type scenario that doesn't have external dependencies. And maybe that's where you should look for initial rate limiting support without that external dependency.
So Michael, if I understand Envoy correctly, it hits the rate limiter on every request. Is that right?
You know, I was just looking at the documentation for that, James. I think you can do, with the local one now, I think you can do like route-based local rate limiting. I don't think it's a global. So there's two modes now. There's like global external, and I think per route.
Okay.
But if you have global external, at least when I looked at the proto, it's just the proto is just is this request rate limited? It doesn't. I didn't see a proto that like lets you check out a bundle of request tickets or ask to be able to serve more than one request.
Yeah, I think the global external one is like that. Yes, it's just am I at this level or not?
Okay.
Yeah, so,
and it gives no
think,
information about like how much quota is left or when it resets or anything like that. Is that accurate?
No, it does. It gives you how much quota is left, but that's only.
But you can only do it one at a time. Yep.
Yeah, that's only the quota left is only informative because you can report that back up to clients, and maybe smart client would rate limit, but you can't enforce on that because you don't know how many proxies are in your cluster.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is some of the problems that I feel are sort of, I think a lot of people. One class of request that I have noticed since coming to work on Contour is Envoy has this knob. Please give us this knob. And it's one of the things that I wanted to make clear with this ticket as well is that, I've also recently added a philosophy document to Contour that sort of tries to make clear how we feel about and how we work with the multiplicity of options that Envoy has. And the thing that's sort of most appropriate here is that we try not to give a knob unless there's a real reason to give a knob. Like if there's a default that's suitable for most people, then we will set that default for everybody. And the case of an early case that I worked on that did not have this was the ability to send logs to have Envoy log via JSON instead of via its own plain text format. And so there was no way for us to do that, to configure that in a default way, because a lot of the people who allow JSON wanted there to be some configurability as well, and that was why we added the config file to do that. But that was a last resort. So in the same case here, the external auth and the rate limiting, there's a lot of bits to configure, and there's a lot of configuration there. There's a lot of configuration space to explore to understand what most people are going to need, what some people are going to need, and what everyone is going to need. And so as your product developers, we want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of as many people as possible in a way that is going to make it easy for the most people. And so that's one of the reasons why we want to be so considered about doing this stuff. Okay, well, Michael, did you have any other issues you would like to talk about?
No, those were the two biggest things I wanted to bring up and kind of gauge the community and see what everybody wanted. If we go by our original starting time, we still have half an hour, but if we go by the start time we really started this meeting, we'll have about 4 minutes. And like Nick mentioned, we'll fix the times in everyone's calendar. But we have a couple more minutes. Is there anything else anybody wants to discuss? If any of you have not provided testimonial, since it's probably one of our biggest community meetings in a while, if anybody has not provided testimonial into how you're using Contour, we'd love to hear from you. There's a issue that's pinned under the Contour repo. So if you go to issues, the first one is pinned up there. Love to hear from you. You don't have to mention your company name if you don't have to. If you can't disclose anything, that's also okay. We love the fact that you guys are here.
Yes, absolutely. I'm sorry, I'm just pulling up that issue link now so I can drop it into the Zoom chat and the show notes. It's in the Zoom chat. And there it is in the show notes as well. I'll add some more color around the issue discussion that we just had in the notes. Now, does anyone else have anything else before we finish up?
No one's asking. I'll take the floor. Just a clarification on the authorization. Is the goal to move? I mean, let me just phrase it this way. Until now, I mean, I guess application developers would push the authorization back into their app, into their container, and they would, you know, the request would come in. You would just get the token or whatever it is, match against it, and come back, right? So it's further up the stack. Is the goal here to move it back so that it happens, so that it's configured between Contour and Envoy, and there's no need to go all the way out and then use some sort of call to some centralized place? And
yes, so that's what the Envoy has. Envoy actually has a filter, an external auth filter, that allows you to configure Envoy to say, you know, to do various types of authentication, whether it's basic or I think it even supports like more advanced stuff like you know, IDC and similar sort of flow protocols as well. You know, and so the idea there is, you know, people ask, definitely a lot of people have asked for that. That issue is sort of one of our highest voted watched tickets, and that, yeah, as I said, there's a lot of, you know, it's very easy to do that feature in a half-assed kind of way that would make it really difficult to use, and that would make it difficult for both the cluster operator and the application developer. And so that's what we want to be more considered. We want to make sure that this feature is, you know, is useful for everybody and doesn't build anybody like a support nightmare by sort of creating something where something can be broken and no one knows until the website's not available.
And this would be auth and auth Z, right? Both.
Yes. Also, I mean, the idea is that, you know, Envoy sort of delegates that off to another thing, and then it's up to that thing whether or not it does auth and auth Z or whatever. Yes.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I mean, again, I can see how useful that would be. Just simply judging by the fact that you have apps that look okay, and then the egress doesn't work for some reason, so the requests come in, they don't get authorized, right? And then you don't get any request. All the requests are returning 403s or something, right? So
yeah, exactly. And that's the exact sort of experience that we want to avoid. That, you know, because, you know, that the experience I want to avoid is, you know, I'm an application developer. I've done the right thing that, you know, that my cluster operators have asked me to do. I've configured my HTTP proxy, and, you know, it has external auth. You know, whether exactly how that's ended up there, whatever. But I don't actually know anything about how the external auth works. But all of a sudden, nobody can get in. It's 403s everywhere. You know, what do I do? You know, and so the idea is that you should be able to just be like, what's up with my HTTP proxy? Get HTTP proxy, whether or not you do that with a command line or with an automated tool or whatever. And then inside that HTTP proxy, there will be a status thing that tells you what what is going on. And so if you are monitoring that HTTP proxy, you can use that for alerting or something like that. Or, and the idea here is that this status information will be added in a machine parsable kind of way as well. So it's useful if you're just using command line, or you can machine parse it if that's what you want to. And it'll be done in accordance with the sort of the broader Kubernetes API conventions as well. So it's parsable with the standard libraries as well, hopefully.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, sure. So basically it would tell you whether the service is available versus if the individual requests failed because it's not authorized, right? That's
exactly. Yeah.
That's the big issue, right? That's usually the issue.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's what I'm saying. That's the sort of the minimum viable information that I feel is necessary. Is, you know, if you have a rate limit or an external auth configured, you know, do you have it configured? Has it been configured successfully? And then is the service that you're depending on actually working? Has it failed? If it's failed, has it failed open? Has it failed closed? You know, all of those things are things that you as an application developer need to be able to get access to.
So the idea is to bubble it up into the status. So you'd have a
Yes.
status saying, okay, got it.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
So
Thanks.
that's the idea. So that then it just cuts like 2 hops of communication out in the event that there is a problem.
Absolutely. Great. Thanks.
I guess if no one else has anything else, then we'll probably call the meeting done here. I profoundly apologize again for the calendaring problems, and so please watch the Slack channel. And I'm not sure if we'll be able to send anything out via the announce on this one, but please watch our communications channels. And what I would anticipate that soon we will say, please delete all meetings from your calendar and subscribe to this calendar, and then that will be the canonical location to get the meetings from.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Have a good rest of your day wherever you are.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye.